I could definitely see something like a scar being left over from it. The Bible tells us that God placed a firmament to separate the waters above from the waters below over the land. And so this is an image of what we would call biblical cosmology. It shows, the floodgates that were opened during the flood. It shows the waters above the firmament. It shows the oceans, and then it shows that there is an abyss even under the ocean. And this is going to come into play in a bit. But as you can see, at least from this image, there is a connection from the ocean to the abyss. And yes, there are what we could call channels going from the abyss to the waters on the earth. Again, this is just something that someone illustrated, but I think it's something that is interesting. Now, there are many people who believe that there is more land. And what I would have to say is that I don't necessarily think that that is unbiblical, because what we are taught about in the Bible is where we are living right here. So this is an old Buddhist map that does appear to show more land, other than what is starting to be called our puddle that we're living on right here. And a good image of that is this. Now, again, these are just graphics. These are just illustrations. We don't know the accuracy or if there's any truth to them at all, but they're ideas. And, we're given this wondrous world, and for us to just sit and just blindly listen to everything that we're told when we know that we're constantly being lied to, just because we're not sure what's going on, doesn't mean that we shouldn't just use our minds, use the brains that God gave us, and just appreciate the creativity of Him, which, again, speculation, but these are some things that I think that many people are coming to think about. So what we have here is what is known more as the puddles. And so what we have here is where we live. This is our puddle. And then there are other puddles besides our own, more lands. And yes, that is connected to why we cannot visit Antarctica, because they don't want us to discover things. Now, you may wonder, what about the firmament? The Bible tells us that God placed a firmament to separate the waters above from the waters below. Well, there are some who will tell you, many who don't believe in the Bible will say that there is no firmament. I, however, believe what the Bible says, and I have been wondering if there is possibly a firmament over each individual world. So we not only have our puddles, but we also have our own individual firmaments. Again, just something to ponder on. Those who do not believe in biblical cosmology as I am presenting it here, but believe the scientific view of how the world looks, often have their own ideas on what the word firmament means in the Bible, because yes, there are different words used for it in different translations. Some examples of those are firmament, there is dome, there is vault. Sometimes it's also called an expanse. And so what I found is that those who are more inclined to believe the scientific worldview of the world will call it an expanse before they would call it a vault or a dome. But let's actually read here where the word rakia, which is the word that firmament comes from, what it actually means. And this is coming from someone, I believe, it seems, at least from reading this, who does not believe in biblical cosmology, but who believes what NASA tells us about the earth. So it says the word rakia comes from the root word raka, which can be found in several passages, including Isaiah 40:19. The idol, a workman casts it and a goldsmith overlays it with gold and casts for it silver chains. The word overlay is the verb root raka. Raka is the process of hammering out a piece of gold or other metal into thin plates, which was then applied to a carved or molten image. Number 1639 reads, So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers, which those who were burned had offered, and they were hammered out as a covering for the altar. Here the phrase were hammered out is again the verb root.
Tied down with credit card payments? Help your finances take off with a balanced transfer card. So you can cut down on interest payments and feel lighter by paying down debt. Find your card on Intuit Credit Karma.
If you're not making $158,000 per year, but you'd like to, I strongly encourage you to start a bookkeeping business. That's right. If you're willing to learn how to use a free program called QuickBooks, you can make 6 figures working part-time from home or anywhere in the world. And here's the thing, QuickBooks is easy to learn and you don't need a degree, prior experience, or to be a math expert to run a successful bookkeeping business. Hi, I'm Bill Von Fumetti, and I've helped over 3,000 people make incredible
Out is again the verb root raka. The firmament is solid. The gold was hammered into thin sheets, then laid over the surface of the altar. They spelled altar wrong. It's going to bother me. The word rakia is the noun form of the verb raka and is literally a hammered out sheet. There are some scientists who have speculated that before the flood, there was a thick sheet of water surrounding the earth up in the atmosphere. It is then possible that the floodgates of heaven were opened at the beginning of the flood, is the collapse of this hammered out sheet of water. It is estimated that the sheet of water would have filtered out harmful sun rays and contributed to the longevity of life on earth before the flood. So yes, so there are many who are teaching creation science, like in textbooks and everything, who will tell us that the firmament was actually a canopy of ice around the earth. And that's how they explained that it was solid. And when that collapsed, that was the waters above. That's what the waters above meant. And when it came down, that's what caused the flood. Well, so what that would mean, if you think about it, is that if that collapsed, then the waters above would no longer be there. But that's a problem. Because in Psalms 148:4, it says, "Praise him, ye heavens of heavens, and ye waters that be above the heavens." So that is written in present tense. King David wrote this. King David was after the flood. So what we at least know just from this verse alone is that the waters were still there. The waters above were still there in King David's time, which means that the water vapor canopy or ice shield theory, whatever you want to call it, that collapsed and caused the Great Flood, that could not have been what the firmament was. At least not if what you believe this says. So now back to the puddles. So again, speculation. If there are individual lands, individual puddles besides our own that very possibly have their own firmaments around them. And if we are to believe what the Bible says, that there are waters above the firmament and there are fountains of the deep, there is the abyss under us as well. Could we then logically reason that not only would there be water underneath these sheets of ice that could possibly connect one puddle to another, but if we have firmaments on each one, would everything around this be water? So the waters above would be surrounding all of these puddles that are enclosed in their own firmaments. This is all water. And then underneath is also water. And can that be why we have so many images related to portals and water? I did a video on The Magician's Nephew not too long ago, so if you've seen that, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But if not, and you haven't read it, there is a section of the book, The Magician's Nephew, where 2 children enter this realm called the Wood Between the World. And it has all of these different puddles where if they enter a puddle, it will take them to another realm. And so I likened it to portals because if you think about it, many times, not only in movies and in books, but even in occultism, water is associated with portals. So here we also, this is from the TV show Stargate, and we have what appears to be water, or at least some form of liquid, that is in the Stargate, the portal taking them to another realm. And so I'm thinking, is it possible that the reason that the water is associated with portals is because you can get to other lands physically through this water, through these waters above and waters below? And in fact, could this be even where some of these creatures that people see could be coming from? Could they be getting here from these other worlds through these waters? And I'm not saying that there are no actual portals. There may well be, but I'm also seeing an association with the actual water, and that you can travel through it and you can get through it possibly. So is that, for example, I did the video the other day on the sea creatures. Is that where some of these sea creatures are coming from and where they disappeared to? Not even necessarily to other ponds, but I mentioned that there could possibly be channels under the water that is connecting these sea creatures to these different lakes, because they're not seen all the time. So they're obviously not in the lakes all the time. And very often there are different descriptions of the sea creatures. And so people will write it off, well, then that's because it's fake. People are making it up. No, what if it's because they're actually seeing different sea creatures because there is some sort of entrance from one of these channels in that lake, and different sea creatures can get up there. Now, some of them may frequent that area more often if that's where they lay their eggs or whatever it is that they do there. But is that why? And so someone did mention, but some of them are too far away from the sea for there to be channels. But the thing is that we don't know how deep these channels go. We don't know what's under there. We do know that there are things underneath us. Enough for us to at least have all of these tunnels that I've talked about so many times. So if we have the abyss under us, I'm certain that the abyss can connect to many places on the earth, and they do not all have to be close to the ocean in order for that to happen. Even when it comes to what many people will call extraterrestrials or aliens, and imagine coming from somewhere on another planet in a galaxy billions and billions of light years away from outer space, and they're flying through the universe, and then that's how they're getting here. What if what we're calling extraterrestrials actually are extraterrestrial, but they are just living on lands that are not this earth, but one of the lands on the other puddles, and that they are somehow able to get here through the abyss? And there are many instances of USOs, unidentified submerged objects, coming out of the water. So is it possible that these could be the inhabitants of these other puddles? Not to say that they're not demonic, because if they are in fact demons, that many people will have hypothesized that they are demons that have taken on some sort of biological suit that they inhabit, because demons don't have bodies of their own. Could that be where they are, what we could even call hiding? I don't know. Just, things to think about. And it actually makes me think of the movie.
If you've ever dreamed of owning an apartment complex and you live near one of these cities, then you've got to see the same ad that I saw 3 years ago. It was for a masterclass that came to my area. I now own 11 apartment complexes. One
makes me think of the movie The Abyss. In the movie The Abyss, there are people who are underwater and they come across some sort of alien ship, alien technology, and of course, they always come across as bringing love and light and everything, which we know that, Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Here's another scene from The Abyss, but we have even there, just a movie example of an unidentified submerged object. So is it possible that these things are able to get to us through these channels under the water? And in fact, like the original commenter said, who believes that many of these hybrid creatures might be dwelling in these other lands. I think it's possible, especially if you realize that many of them do live underground. So do they live underground because they have better access to the abyss from down there to travel in? I don't know. Maybe. So here I'm going to show you Mike DeGroy. It's not going to show him, I don't think, but he actually found an underwater brine lake. And many people have pondered if this brine lake, which certainly seems to be a different consistency liquid than what the ocean is, could this possibly be an entrance to the abyss? Or could it also be, many people have, wondered if this could also be part of the firmament? But I'm just going to show you a bit of that here. So we can see that this is an actual lake. He is in the ocean in a submersible, and he has come to, oh, it does show him. And I must say that he actually passed away not too long after discovering this. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. And so they find this lake, and the shore is like lapping up on the sides. As you can see, there are eels down there. But when they try to maneuver the submersible to enter this water, this lake inside the ocean, it bounces off. They cannot enter it. And so that's why I don't know if they took samples of it or not. They're calling it a brine lake. I'm assuming because the Dead Sea has a very high saline content, which makes things very easy to float. So that's probably why it's a brine lake, because things float when there's a lot of salt. And that could possibly be why the submersible. And that's where he's showing that it kind of bounced back up. So, yeah. And speaking of portals, there is even the book of Enoch that talks about the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And so I'm not going to read all of this to you, but again, I always link the articles that I share in the description, so you can read this if you would like. But it tells you how the sun, the luminary of the sun, has its rising in the eastern portals of the heaven and its setting in the western portals of the heaven. And I saw 6 portals in which the sun rises, and 6 portals in which the sun sets. And the moon rises and sets in these portals, and the leaders of the stars and those whom they lead, 6 in the east and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. Also, many windows to the right and left of these portals. So there's much speculation that these portals can be found in Antarctica, because remember, it goes around we're speculating that it goes around the Earth, and that is where the firmament ends for us. And could these portals that it's referring to in the book of Enoch also be down in the firmament? And so they know that, we know that they do not want us going down there and exploring on our own in Antarctica. And, they will cite the Antarctic Treaty and how it has to stay pristine down there because of the environment. And, it's funny that countries are always at each other's throats, somehow all unanimously agree on this when they can never agree on anything else. But anyway, so we've got this going on, and they also say that it's too dangerous for people to explore down there on their own. It very well could be. I'm sure it's very, very cold down there, but there's something down there. There's something about Antarctica. So, for example, we have many world leaders that just happen to go down there. So I found this interesting, and I saw this years ago, and I just was thinking about it again. So the Russian Orthodox, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, he met with Pope Francis in Cuba in 2016. And it was the first time that they had met in 1,000 years. Obviously not these two people. I don't think they were alive for 1,000 years, but it's the first time that the Pope and the Russian Patriarch met in 1,000 years. Well, shortly after this meeting that has unprecedented almost, the Patriarch then took a trip down to Antarctica. And it says here that he went down there to I believe, for a church service. And, it's possible. He could have. See, it says on February 17th, 2016, His Holiness Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Russia visited the Bellinghausen station on Waterloo Island in Antarctica. The plane carrying the Patriarch and his party took off after 7 o'clock in the morning local time. The first ever visit of the primate, is that what that says, of the Russian Orthodox Church to Antarctica took place at the invitation of the head of the Russian Antarctic Expedition, V. Lukin. The invitation stated, "At present, we begin preparing for the celebration of the 200th anniversary of the discovery of Antarctica by the Russian South Polar Expedition, commanded by Fatty F. Bellinghausen and Mikhail P. Lazarev. The expedition sloops Vostok and Mirny reached for the first time the coasts of an unknown sixth continent on January 28, 1820, and Russian seamen became the first people on our planet to see, describe, and map the unknown coasts." I'm not going to read any more of this. It's just basically, I just wanted you to see that he visited Antarctica, and he visited Antarctica within days of meeting with the Pope for the first time ever. So that's certainly interesting. And then we have 6 years later, in a rare move, a world leader visits Antarctica. So here we have that the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, with her partner Clark Gayford, set foot on Antarctica this week. I hate pop-ups. A rare visit by a world leader to the frigid region. So now we have the Prime Minister of New Zealand is visiting Antarctica. Now, this one here, it does not say that he visited Antarctica, but there is much speculation that Obama also visited Antarctica when he actually went down to Cuba. Sorry, not Cuba, to well, he did go to Cuba, but to Argentina, and he went there just about less than a month before or after the...
Right now, it is a time of war in Israel. Many of our family members...
Just about less than a month before or after the head of the Russian Orthodox Church went down to Antarctica. So the reason that that many people believe that Obama also went down there during that time is because not only was the timing with the meeting between the two popes and then the Russian Orthodox head of the Russian Orthodox Church going down to Antarctica, and then Obama is in Argentina, and what do you notice here? Well, look at that. It's awfully close to Antarctica. And I looked it up, and the tip of Antarctica to this ice shelf here is only 600 miles, which is really a drop in the bucket. So that's why, yeah, there are many people who believe that while he was down there in Argentina, that Obama as well went down there for what we might call an unofficial visit. And then you have to wonder, what are all these people? Why are they all going down there? And we also know that Buzz Aldrin also went, again, the same year that the Kirill went, possibly Obama, and then Aldrin also went there. And I also know that John Kerry went. Let me look up when John Kerry was there. Will you look at that? John Kerry also went to Antarctica the same year. So there was definitely something about 2016 especially, and I know that the New Zealand Prime Minister, she went down there, I believe it was in 2022, and she went down there for, well, what they're saying is for climate change. But here we have all of these other very important people going to Antarctica in 2016, and you have to wonder why. What are they hiding down there? What are they doing down there? What do they know? And again, especially when it comes to the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, I don't know much about him. So I can't say that I think that he had anything nefarious going on, but I do think that it was very interesting that he met up with the Pope first and then went down there the same year that everyone else did. And, you just have to wonder why, what could possibly be the reason. And actually, one thing that I just thought of regarding the extra lands, there are also people who believe that after the resets that may have happened, that the world was actually repopulated by bringing in inhabitants from the other lands, and that so they were not native to our part of the realm, and that is why they all kind of looked so out of place, is because they were shipped here from these other lands in an effort to repopulate. I mean, this would all make a fantastic like fantasy series, don't you think? I wish that I were good at writing fiction, but I'm not. So I know that I already talked about the creatures being able to possibly get in through these channels before, but I'm going to share this last comment today. And this is from Tanisha, and she said, I was going to write this comment before you brought up the underground channels. Many years ago, my ex-stepmom's sister and her husband told me that on their property, a gigantic dragon-like creature came up out of a pond on their property through a channel that was connected to Lake Michigan here in northern Indiana. They live close to the lake. I didn't believe their story of it coming up, throwing muck all over the side of the pond and going back in. Well, until they showed me pictures they took and the local news story that covered it back then. They told me about it probably 25 years ago, and it happened probably 10 years before that, give or take. I doubt that footage still exists, sadly, but who knows? I am a believer in all strange things since seeing that when I was a teenager, though, so it has only helped guide me on this path. That is amazing. I would love to know if that footage does still exist somewhere. And while I am certainly a believer that there are creatures out there that we don't know what they are, so right now we call them cryptids, I believe that many of the creatures that we refer to, especially those of the sea, are simply creatures that are already there. Like, for example, this is an oarfish, and you can't get more sea serpent like, in my opinion, than this. So, could this have been something that was referred to in times past as a sea serpent? I think it's very possible. And I think we have to remember that much of what we see in the ocean nowadays could have been referred to as sea monsters. They definitely were referred to as sea monsters. You know, when you know that, for example, things like what they call the kraken were, a giant octopus, so these creatures, even though we look at them as being fantasy and mythical, I think that they're just actual real animals that we just, we haven't discovered yet. Another example of what I think some people might be seeing when they think they see a sea serpent is a moray eel. Now, these don't get very big, but in the Pacific Ocean, now on average, the moray eel does get to be about 5 feet long, which is long enough. But in the Pacific, moray eels do grow to be about 11.5 feet long. And in fact, I think that the moray eel could very well be what is called the mamlambo in South Africa. The basking shark is another example. And I actually did read this in an article, which I will probably expound upon in a future video that's dedicated more to this sort of thing. But the basking shark, if just this part of its snout is sticking up out of the water, then that certainly could look like the head of another creature. So I think that that is another possibility as well. Again, not to say that none of these other like sea creatures exist, but just that I think that some of them, we already have sea serpents. This is a sea serpent. This is a sea serpent. And yes, some people may not call this a sea serpent, but certainly a sea monster. So just because it's something that is known, doesn't mean that it would not fall under something like sea serpent, especially when you see something like this. I think they're really cool. But anyway, that's all that I have on this topic for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page or my YouTube channel membership, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have